going back to your sort of longer term vision for fencing and fortress conservation, it's kind of a failure, though, isn't it? The fact that we have to do that.
It's a failure of society.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. It's very sad that we've had to resort to fences and fortress conservation. It's basically admitting that humanity cannot coexist with wildlife.
And that's why this area here is such an amazing and important model.
Because if it works here, it
can work
proves
elsewhere.
that coexistence can actually work.
Welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. I'm your host, Byron Pace, and this is a Modern Huntsman production. I am currently back home in Scotland, sat at my desk. It is beautiful and sunny and warm outside, and that is where I'd rather be. But unfortunately, I have a bunch of projects from the last few months that I'm trying to get on top of, including Paid in Blood, which has been giving me a headache all morning because I'm so close to being finished. This should be the last round of feedback this week, but for those filmmakers out there, or anybody who's used Adobe Premiere Pro, you will know how temperamental it is, and it just will not render out for me. So I've had an incredibly frustrating start to my Tuesday morning, and a colossal waste of my time that I'm never going to get back. But hopefully I'm going to be able to resolve this problem in the next couple of hours and actually kick out a project. I am not long back from Rwanda, where I had the great privilege of filming gorillas for a couple of days with John Banovich. You'll see more from that in the coming weeks and months. The series From the Front Lines, of which you've heard 3 episodes now, will be continuing in the coming weeks. We're taking a brief break while I organize that next interview and get that whole show put together. That series has been supported by Rocky Talkie, who make these brilliant, very compact, extremely rugged radios for the backcountry. You can still get 10% off those if you visit rockytalkie.com/into the wilderness. That's rockytalkie.com/into the wilderness. That's the name of this podcast, for 10% off your set of Rocky Talkie radios. I've been using them continually now for more than 4 months in the field, and they've been brilliant. And I don't leave the house for a production without them now. So we are returning to From the Field, which started in episode 200, if you want to go all the way back there. But that was a very highly integrated show. There was only 3 episodes. We had 8 or 9 interviews, and each one was about 30 minutes long. But we did these 8 or 9 interviews that were full-blown 1 hour, 1.5 hour conversations, and so much of that got left out. And that is what I'm bringing to you here. You've already heard from conservation biologist Willem Brier Louw and concession operator of Zambeze Delta Safaris, Mark Haldane, in the last couple of weeks. So skip back if you missed those. They're brilliant conversations. In this show, I'm going to sit down with Tyler Sharp, editor-in-chief of Modern Huntsman, and Vincent van der Merwe, who is a specialist in the conservation of cheetah. So we're going to hear all about this incredible species and the challenges they are facing. Lastly, before we jump into this episode, a massive thank you to the Patreon supporters this week, who include Richard McNeil, Ronnie Speakman of RD Contracting, James Marchington, the guys at South Esher Stalking, Dick Ekstrom, Mark Zabrowski, and Leslie Cumming. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to support this show, head over to patreon.com/Byron Pace. That can be the opening sound.
I was going to say, yeah.
The opening sound.
This is going to be like that one Scotch podcast we did where
we were pissed.
Yeah. Well, I was definitely pissed. But we've got 3 more beers, so we'll have to open these during the middle. Beer break.
So we are sat here, quite literally in the middle of a landing strip in the bush in Mozambique. Tyler Sharp is joining me, and Vincent, I actually don't even know your second name. What's your second name, Vincent?
My second name is Van der Merwe. So it's a very common...
Like the rugby player?
Yes, that's correct, the Scottish rugby player.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's a very Duan Van der Merwe. Yeah, it's a very common South African name. It's like the Joneses in Wales.
Yeah.
People have a lot of jokes about us, and it's
People might think that was quite rude, though. I hadn't actually worked out your second name, but we literally have been running non-stop since you arrived yesterday. explain what has been happening in the last day or two, because the journey that you've just taken, we'll dig into some of your background and stuff in a minute, but the journey that you have just taken with the cargo that you have just transported is pretty special.
Yes, this is a giant leap forward for our cheetah conservation project. You know, in South Africa and in other parts of Southern Africa, Malawi, Zambia, we get access to small reintroduction sites, you know, ranging from 20,000 hectares to maybe 70,000 hectares. Maromeo, Zambeze Delta, where we are now, represents 900,000 hectares of safe space for cheetah. So this is really a wonderful opportunity. This area has the ecological capacity to support 120 cheetahs. And this is by far our largest reintroduction. You know, we've released 11 cats here now. It was supposed to be 12. We lost one. But it's been one hell of a journey. I don't know if you have time for me to delve into it.
Oh, damn right, yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, okay. I want to hear. I mean, I'm interested because we were obviously only part of it from when your wheels touched down here in Kutada 11. But this journey actually started many days before, because you had to go and catch these cheetah, yeah?
Yes.
So how come you were able? Tell me about the population where they came from.
Okay, so it all started way before I became involved in cheetah conservation. Democracy comes to South Africa, and just before democracy, there was change in legislation in South Africa that allowed landowners to own the wildlife on their property. So democracy came and there was this tourism boom in South Africa, and a lot of agricultural land switched to conservation, ecotourism. People actually made more money out of ecotourism than agriculture. So they brought in lions, leopards, cheetahs, reintroduced them onto these large farms, which were previously mainly cattle farms, and created what we call a meta population. So basically, there was this tourism boom, and these tourists were willing to pay lots of money to come and see these animals. And the condition that government gave to these privately owned and some of them were state-owned reserves is that you have to fence these reserves. And the moment you fence a reserve, you fence humanity out. And
this is fortress conservation.
Fortress conservation, absolutely, which is against the current conservation paradigm. Everyone's looking at coexistence at this point in time. So we're very much against the current paradigm in conservation. We're not personally against it, but this project that we inherited was due to fortress conservation. And
but that was of the time, right? Like everything from the colonial era onwards kind of brought that with the national park system, which actually was inherited from the Americans.
Yes.
Like you can visit it, but you can't live in it anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously if you fence humanity out, you take out the greatest danger to cheetahs. And so these cheetah populations started to flourish. But because they're such small reserves, I was employed initially simply to do cheetah swaps between reserves to prevent inbreeding.
Okay. Because this is one of the major issues with these fenced areas, even relatively speaking, big fenced areas, is you don't have this genetic flow.
Exactly. Long gone are the days of the wide open spaces for animals to move freely. We're now stuck with these small little islands.
We've got company. Yeah. We drove out to the middle of the airstrip so that we wouldn't be disturbed, and clearly somebody's
two different vehicles are now pulling up. Yeah.
Let's see what's happening.
Yeah.
Maybe we're off to go and collar a leopard already. I don't know.
Hello.
Did we run away with something in here?
Okay, so yes, yeah. So basically we inherited all these fenced areas, and my job was simply to ensure genetic health of the cheetahs in these fenced areas. So after apartheid, cheetah were reintroduced into 45 fenced reserves across South Africa.
Wow. And they had been hammered by the flourishing farming, hadn't it? Because they're huge predators when it comes to livestock.
Yes, they're a big pest for goats and sheep. Sometimes young cattle as well. Adult cattle obviously too big for cheetah. But yes, and South Africa was the most heavily colonized country in Africa. So you can see, if you look at a map of South Africa, the colonials arrived in Cape Town, and as they moved upwards into the country, they completely decimated wild cheetah populations. In the 1960s, we had just 300 cheetah left in South Africa.
300?
300, yeah.
Wow.
And we're now on 1,300 wild cheetahs, just through reintroductions. And it's been a wonderful thing to observe, and it's all thanks to democracy and private land ownership and respecting property value. Yeah.
Was there underlying genetic issues from only having 3 animals, or is that enough? Like as a bottleneck?
Yes. The cheetah bottleneck theory has actually been refuted by the latest science.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So cheetahs actually have similar levels of genetic diversity compared to other large predators. It's just that, in the 1980s, when those initial genetic tests were done on cheetahs, they worked with allozymes, not actually with DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And this bottleneck theory came about because someone skin grafted a piece of cheetah skin from one cheetah onto another, and miraculously, the what do you call it? The immune system of that cheetah didn't reject this foreign skin, which is very abnormal. And as a result of that, this bottleneck theory came about. That cheetahs went through a bottleneck 10,000 years ago during the last ice age, where the whole global population shrank, and that all cheetahs stem from this tiny population of 3 individuals, which has now been completely refuted.
Okay. So the 300 the population of 1,300 you said now?
Yes.
Came from the 300 that were left?
Yes, in South Africa.
In South Africa. Was there introductions from other countries?
Yes, because Namibia was a colony of South Africa. And Namibia
being German colony.
In World War I, being a British colony, we invaded Namibia and inherited it as a colony.
Mm-hmm.
And Namibia has the largest cheetah population worldwide, and a lot of problem animals on their livestock farms.
Yeah.
And we imported 300 of those cheetah into South Africa,
okay.
and that's how we started to grow our populations.
Huh. And just in terms of a more global perspective on cheetah, where else do you get cheetah, and how many species of cheetah are there?
So this is a very interesting question. If a cheetah occurred widely across Africa, except for the forested areas, jungle areas, and then they occurred throughout the Middle East, all the way to Burma and India, Bangladesh, and all the way north to Russia.
In Russia?
Yeah, in 1979, the last cheetah was seen in the Soviet Union.
But is that the same cheetah that's here, or is this a different species?
So that is, yes, so there are let me just get it right, 5, so 5 subspecies of cheetah. Southern African cheetah, East African cheetah, there's a lot of discrepancy as to whether they are actually separate.
Okay.
Because there's no geographical barrier between us and East Africa.
But they're morphologically different?
Not actually.
No?
There's
like colour variation?
Slight colour variation.
Okay.
But if you
does that really go back to the old categorization where they were just like doing measurements, and if something was a slightly different colour, they called it a subspecies?
Exactly. You had...
but genetically similar? Genetically
similar. You had what they call lumpers and splitters. So if the taxonomist working on cheetah was a splitter, some people tend to split things into categories.
Oh, okay. I never heard that.
Yes. And then you get some scientists or taxonomists that are lumpers, and they just lump everything into the same group,
Okay. Okay.
So, for cheetahs, they split East and Southern African and then West African. And then there's a little population that did get caught between the Ethiopian highlands and the Red Sea. That was jammed in there and evolved into something separate. That's the Northeast African cheetah, or the Somali Djibouti cheetah, and then the Asiatic cheetah.
Of course, yeah. And there's not many Asiatic cheetahs left, is there?
There's about 20 to 40 left in Iran. We're working very closely with the Iranian Cheetah Society. They left in one population in Turan National Park. But from a genetic perspective, that population is functionally extinct.
It is. So what are the, I realize we're getting slightly off topic from what we're doing here. We're still talking about cheetah. What are they actually doing there? Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I seem to remember them wanting to try and reintroduce Southern African cheetah just to bolster the population, even though it's different.
This is actually a project we're working on right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've recently managed to extract a West African cheetah sample, which showed strong genetic similarities to Asiatic cheetah.
Interesting.
And we've employed an Iranian to go to West Africa to catch more cheetah, and then to verify what we found. And it makes sense, because if you look at North Africa and West Africa it's connected to Asia through the Sinai Peninsula, there by Egypt and Israel. So there's no reason as to why there would have been limited there's no barrier to gene flow between North Africa and Asia. So we've still got to learn a lot about cheetah genetics. We certainly haven't solved it. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and we might find that they actually all pretty much the same thing.
That's well, yeah. I'm gonna have to follow up on that. 22, because they have to do something now, or they're gonna lose the.
Exactly, and that's what we're hoping. We really are hoping that we can get some gene flow going between West Africa and Iran, and we've employed an Iranian to do the West African work.
Okay.
So just to get that connection going.
Have they got pretty heavy? So what was the reason for the decline in population there? Was the same sort of deal as in Southern Africa, or different?
It's actually it's quite an interesting story. Now, why are the cheetah populations in Asia decimated? And the simple answer to that is that this is where agriculture started in Iran and Iraq 13,000 years ago. This is where humans first started domesticating animals and plants. And humans, since we started practicing agriculture, we've had a very unhealthy relationship with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And
us.
Yes, yeah, them and us. And 13,000 years of agriculture in the Middle East, sheep farming, goat farming, resulted in retaliatory killings, and their wild cheetah populations have been decimated. If you look at West Africa, that's where agriculture started in Black Africa. 7,000 years of agriculture in West Africa, you've only got 200 cheetah left. Agriculture only hit East Africa 2,000 years ago. And that's why they got 2,000 cheetah left. And it only hit where we are now in Southern Africa 1,500 years ago. So we've got 4,000 cheetah because we've only had agriculture here for a very short period of time.
So this correlation of conflict is very clear in that.
Exactly. Humans do not coexist well with cheetahs. I mean, you can't put a cheetahs into an area where they're practicing goat and sheep farming.
Oh, sorry, I just want to move this cable here. Just there.
No problem.
Make a little less noise. So, this amazing tangent that we've just gone off on, but back to Mozambique, back to South Africa, back to this increased population to 1,300 plus, has allowed you now, I'm guessing here, I'm reading between the lines, to siphon off some of that population and repopulate in other places, which I'm guessing is what you're doing here.
Exactly. So we have a growing wild cheetah population. Our population is expanding by 40 individuals per year. And the government has given us permission to take this surplus of cheetahs and to reintroduce them into other parts of Africa. And at the end of this year, we reintroduce into India in November.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Are you doing that in India?
Yes.
That is exciting.
Yes.
Having spent a bit of time in India, that's awesome.
Very exciting, but also a bit nerve-wracking. We're using Merwe as sort of a tester to see if there's one place in Africa where the coexistence model could work, it's Merwe. And that's because the hunters have a very healthy relationship with the surrounding community. They give them meat, they give them medical supplies, they give them, they've improved the schooling in the surrounding area. And this means that they have a healthy relationship with the surrounding community, which means we could actually get the coexistence model right here.
And this is because there is a very clear trade-off between the conservation concern, which in this instance is cheetahs, and local communities actually seeing benefit from that. Is that why?
Absolutely. There must be visible benefits to them. Otherwise, they don't have an interest in protecting the wildlife. Because we know the data is very clear on the fact that unless you raise communities in Africa into the middle income bracket, the environment is not going to be their top concern. People only.
I mean, that's understandable. Why on earth would it be?
Exactly.
If you got to worry about eating the next day, how can you be concerned about conservation? I mean, it's a very kind of privileged position to worry about conservation of species, I think.
Exactly. And people only become environmentally conscious when they're in the middle income bracket. So they have to see the benefits of conservation must be visible to that community. Otherwise, they are not going to be interested.
So tell me about the capture process back in South Africa that we weren't part of. We just saw you guys arriving. What did that entail?
It was actually, it started way before that, if you don't mind me delving into that. Yeah. So we just, we had this expanding population and we needed to relocate surplus animals to other parts of Africa, because otherwise we were going to have to either euthanize or we were going to literally have to contracept.
Okay. Yeah. So this is there's two stories here. So one is your ability, because of increasing populations, to put animals somewhere else, but you also actually had a problem.
Yes, a surplus of cheetahs.
Okay.
And Malawi was our first reintroduction site. The reserves there were fenced by African parks, and we relocated cheetahs to Malawi, and as soon as they landed, they took off. The population started increasing and created more problems, because what we were going to do with the surplus in Malawi now. And then we started looking elsewhere. So I was actually driving down from Malawi back to South Africa, and I heard about this place called Merwe, and I phoned up Mark Haldane, the manager of Kotara 11, and I said, look, I'd love to just come and have a look and see what this place is all about, and to investigate prospects for introduction. And he said, no problem, and he whisked me off in his helicopter, and I saw those floodplains, and I said, we are good to go.
It is a go.
The problem is, he said to me, Vincent, I want proof of the historical presence of the species in this area.
Yep.
And that was, of course, a big mission, because Mozambique wasn't a heavily colonized country, and not many hunters and colonials really moved through these areas, because this area was, of course, heavily infested with malaria and sleeping sickness and all kinds of horrible things historically. And we went down to the Maputo Natural History Museum, and we found some old Portuguese literature that spoke about a cheetah population close to Quilimane, but didn't give any real specifics. Now, Quilimane's about 200 kilometers north of here. So I delved a little bit more into the Portuguese literature with translators, and we didn't find much. And eventually I thought, okay, the only place is to go to the largest library worldwide, and that's the British Library in London. And we marched in there, and it was a wonderful experience. Just such a massive library.
It's insane, that place.
It's a really wonderful place, and good internet connection.
Unlike out here, which is what we want when we're out here, to be fair.
And we went and I dug through the literature, and I found this book called Wild Game Hunting on the Zambeze, written by a British chap called Malcolm in 1950.
You know I'm going to have to look this up now.
Yeah.
We both need this in our library now.
Yeah.
And I started reading the book, and I went to the index, and I looked up cheetah, and I couldn't believe it. Boom, there it was.
Really?
Page
1915.
1915. Page 178, Wild Game Hunting on the Zambeze.
Man, you have a good memory. But why was this clearly such a burden of importance for Mark? And, was it important to you before he had mentioned it, making sure that there was a historical range here?
Yes, if you want to do cheetah reintroduction responsibly, you first want to check that the species survived here historically.
For any species, I guess.
Absolutely. So that, because we knew that if we're going to proceed with this reintroduction, other organizations, conservation organizations, are going to ask questions.
Yeah.
And you want to have that evidence, So this Malcolm chap was marching along here in 1905. The book was published in 1915, but he came through this area in 1905, and he saw a martial eagle bombarding something at the mouth of the Zambeze, where it goes into the sea. And as they did in those days, he shot the martial eagle.
Of course he did.
And
remember, people, Darwin shot a lot of stuff too.
Exactly. And this bird came crashing down, and they went to collect it. And what did they find? It was bombarding 3 young cheetah cubs. And that was our proof of the historical presence of cheetah in the Zambeze Delta. Yeah. And then Mark gave the thumbs up.
Okay. And so now it was a go.
Now it was a go. And then we had to, of course, do the bureaucracy, the import permits, export permits, but we had to identify 10 suitable cheetah for reintroduction. Ideally.
So what does suitable mean?
So lion have obviously been reintroduced into the Delta, which is the
it's
main...
a whole other story here.
Yeah. Yes. They're the main killers of cheetah, lion. So in South Africa, 45% of our cheetah mortalities are due to lion.
Wow, I didn't realize it was as high as that.
Yeah. No, lion are the principal killers of cheetah. and 9% due to leopard. And then we're not sure how much cheetah mortality is due to spotted hyena, but we lose a lot of cubs to. We're pretty confident that it's somewhere in the vicinity of 15 to 20% of wild cheetah mortality due to hyena, just hyenas eating cubs in the den site.
So they got a lot against them.
Yes, they really are the underdogs of the large carnivore world.
Yeah.
And
Under cats.
yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, we had to identify hard, predator-savvy cheetah to survive here. So we couldn't go to a soft reserve where cheetah haven't seen competing predators before. We had to get hardy animals.
Like, this is a big cheetah I'm seeing with a big shaggy mane. So they needed to be smart, basically.
Exactly. We call it predator-savvy.
Okay.
And we went and we identified 12 individuals, 2 from Malawi and 10 from South Africa. And and then I had to go capture these cheetah on 7 different reserves across southern Africa.
So how long did that take?
That took us about 2 months to
Wow.
gather all these cheetah up. And it was quite a nerve-wracking experience because the first 2 we caught were the 2 females in Malawi. And we got them in the boma, and I phoned Mark and Ivan Carter, who are the coordinators of the conservation efforts here. And they said to me, fantastic, well done, we've got the 2 Malawi cats. And the next day, a pride of lions walked past the boma where we'd put these 2 Malawi cats into and spooked these 2 females, and the one ran into the fence and broke her neck. So that was a big, these wildlife reintroductions are a roller coaster ride. It's highs and lows. And this was obviously a big low point. And they said, don't worry, Vincent, carry on with the project. We still got the 1 female from Malawi. Proceed with the capture of the 10 animals in South Africa. And so off we went, and we caught our first female in the Free State, which is a very different habitat to here. Vast open grassland plains, temperatures reaching -8 in winter. And we caught a female there, and we relocated her to a quarantine facility in Zululand where we were going to store all the 10 cheetahs from South Africa. And halfway through the journey, she died from capture stress. So of the first 3 cats that we caught, we'd lost 2 already due to various complications.
But it's sad, and obviously everybody wishes that doesn't happen, but there's always going to be a risk of mortality in any big capture or any conservation endeavor on this kind of scale, right?
Absolutely, and
I don't think that's very well articulated to the wider world. We see all these amazing successes all the time, but there's actually a price to pay sometimes.
Exactly. Wildlife reintroductions are inherently risky, and most conservationists are not willing to go ahead with it because you are going to lose animals. And we pick up a lot of flack for it. We've lost over 40 cheetahs over the past 10 years, relocating them between reserves due to capture stress. I mean, these are wild-born cheetahs. They've never been in a confined space before. You stick them into a 0.5 by 1 meter crate. It's a very stressful experience. And we lose animals, and...
But you're concerned about the species more than you're concerned about the individual. As much as you are concerned about the individual, the end goal here is the conservation of the species.
You've got to look at the bigger picture. Absolutely. And at the end of the day, despite all these losses, we are still winning. Our cheetahs are genetically healthy and the population is growing. So that's what we're aiming at. And then after that, we managed to find 1 replacement female for the one we'd lost, and we proceeded with the capture of the other 8 cheetahs, and we got all 8 safely to the quarantine bomas. It was basically a month of driving around, capturing helicopters, darting, driving late nights, emailing permits, bureaucracy.
Yeah, I don't envy I think the paperwork sounds like the hardest part of all of this.
Absolutely. No, I tell you, I don't want to see another permit office in my life.
And just to clarify for anyone who's never been to Africa, boma basically means an enclosure. It's a fence. In most cases, it's a village, right? Made of sticks and grass and thorns. But in these cases, these are constructed enclosures to keep the cats in.
Absolutely. And we've learned this from experience that bomas are very important. when you relocate cheetah between different areas because they have an inbuilt GPS. They have a homing system. So if you don't use bomas and you just hard release them into the new reserve, they simply walk back to where they came from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Which is not what you want.
We-
And they probably wouldn't be able to walk back from here.
No.
So they just end up outside this area, which is, like you were saying, I think you said at the start, is an unfenced area.
Exactly.
It might be worth just expanding on that and how amazing it is, or how important it is for the future of the conservation of cheetah on the continent of Africa that these animals are being released in an unfenced area.
Yes, because we really do have to give the coexistence system a go. We've run out of fenced areas. Fencing wildlife is expensive, and there's something artificial about it.
I was just going to ask you that. Like, how do you personally feel about fenced areas? Because I struggle with it, because I see the value in the protectionist mindset, and I can see where that is being good. But I also see that it's a system in my mind that is breaking down now, because we have these islands of protectionism which are not big enough anymore. And all this stuff in between where people exist, which we assume is not the place that conservation exists anymore. It only exists in these silos. And in my mind, I would much rather see an integrated landscape where, we have some areas which are fenced and which are very heavily and highly protected. But we have these corridors which exist where people exist with nature.
It's a tricky one because in Africa we still have another 200 years of exponential human population growth ahead of us. And we've also got a lot of economic development coming. Improved road infrastructure, bigger cities, more towns, more agriculture, more transformation of the landscape. So my personal belief is that we will unfortunately be seeing an increase in fencing across Africa over the next 200 years. It's very sad, but in the long run, when Africa does eventually reach that point where most people are in the middle income bracket, and we will get there, I mean, we're seeing a lot of improvement on this continent, we will get there, then we can tear down the fences. Okay. But I honestly, personally believe that we're a good 200 years away from that. Which is very sad, because, like I was saying, there's something very artificial about these fence systems, not truly natural.
Yeah. So you had all of these cheetah now in this boma in South Africa. What happened next? Because a lot of planes arrived here the other day.
No, we're very reliant on philanthropy. Wealthy individuals, mainly from the West, providing the massive funding that is required to move 10 wild cheetahs from South Africa, 1,000 kilometers across the subcontinent to Mozambique. And we've got to find, it's a terrible word to use, but fixers. So wildlife champions, so people that are good at working with these philanthropists from the West. And Ivan Carter is a very good example of a person who's got these valuable connections between Africa and the wealthy individuals in the West who have an interest in promoting conservation and doing something useful for the environment. And he came across the Gabela family from the US who were very helpful in funding this relocation, so funding the collars, that's you're looking at about, $300 per collar. Sorry, I think I've got that wrong.
I don't know.
I think it's about $400 per collar fitted to all 12 cheetahs, paying 4 aircraft to relocate the cheetah from South Africa to Mozambique. And it was wonderful having these guys on board, funding the operation and participating in it. And
because without it, this just wouldn't have happened. Right?
We are totally reliant on Western philanthropy to do all the work that we do.
I think a lot of people think that that if you were to not explain how this was able to come about, that it was probably facilitated by a big NGO somewhere. But so, my experience of conservation, particularly on the continent of Africa, is exactly the example that you've just painted, where it's a family, it's a person who is
Exactly.
basically paying for this stuff.
Exactly. And, we had our first example of, we have a Chinese philanthropist that recently funded a cheetah reintroduction in South Africa. And that was a giant leap forward for us because, it's really nice to see, money coming in from another avenue. So yes, we're totally reliant on these individuals to make the finances available, to give us the logistical muscle to do this work. And this all happened thanks to their participation.
Well, and the other interesting part of that too is that most people would not equate, relocation and conservation in this way with hunting dollars.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, this is, it's been a big, learning curve for me personally. I was, they say, in your 20s, if you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart. And if you're in your 30s and if you're not a capitalist, you don't have a brain. And what we've realized is that without the conservation dollars coming in, it's impossible to protect these last few remaining natural landscapes in Africa. And Merwe is a prime example of an area that cannot bring in dollars through ecotourism because it's flooded for 6 months of the year. Yeah. So your only option here to bring in those conservation dollars is to engage with the hunters. And the hunters are they're quite an easy bunch to please. You don't have to put them in a fancy lodge. They're happy to come and stay in a tent in a rugged environment and to spend their money. And
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And they employ a lot of people in the process. They uplift the local communities socially and economically. And they come and have a good time. And it's a pleasure to work with the hunters because they're doers. They're movers and shakers. They a big problem with a lot of the work that we do is that, we come across a lot of risk-averse conservationists, hands-off conservationists. Just leave it, don't touch it. But we've completely transformed the landscape in Africa. We really, because of the anthropogenic destruction of the landscape, we have to now, it's our responsibility to manage the damage that we've done.
Absolutely.
To encourage gene flow between the few remaining fragments of habitat or natural habitat in Africa. So you really do need movers and shakers and doers and yes, let's go people. And the hunters are exactly that. And it's, they've created here for us 900,000 hectares of safe space. I mean, if you came to this place, to Merwe 30 years ago, the wildlife was completely wiped out by 15 years of civil war. Mm. And the hunters have come in here and they've rejuvenated this place. They've
done it by working with the local communities from what we've seen.
Exactly. They haven't
engaging
fenced.
them. No, there's no fences. And Tyler, you and I saw this when we were flying in. I mean, it was amazing. We were flying in and we're looking at all this amazing habitat and not really seeing any game. And then Dusty said, "Oh no, we're just crossing the concession now," and then all of a sudden there was like warthogs and reedbuck, and we were seeing game everywhere.
Yeah, I mean within 50 yards of crossing the boundary of the game reserve. I mean, and he had pointed out where some of the burn areas were and where previous villages had been and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, as soon as we crossed the border over the river, there was game everywhere.
And that's thanks to 30 years of work by the hunters. Mm-hmm. The irony is that they've actually overseen population growth and ecosystem.
You mean human population growth?
No, wildlife. My apologies. Wildlife population growth.
Yeah.
The human population growth has also happened.
Yeah.
And they've overseen this wildlife population growth in the face of human population growth, which is a remarkable feat. And, they've restored ecological functioning in this area.
Which is the ultimate goal of conservation, really.
Exactly.
Is ecosystem function.
Exactly.
Because then everything has a place. So I'm curious, as someone who clearly has a deep fascination and passion for cheetah, you're seeing in an area like this where clearly, there's hunters coming in and they're hunting everything from reedbuck to leopards. It can feel like to the outside world, well, how can you be so strongly driven by the conservation of something like big cats, but be happy for someone to go and kill a leopard, for example?
Yes, it's a tough one. I mean, the simple answer to that is that you remove the hunters from the equation here, you knock the leopards out completely.
So it's a trade.
Exactly. You'd rather have a little bit of hunting than no hunting at all. Because once you remove the hunters from here, you remove any form of revenue from coming in here. You remove any form of employment for the local communities here. You remove their source of meat, their stable meat supply.
So leopards wouldn't be tolerated, cheetahs wouldn't be tolerated, lions wouldn't be tolerated.
Absolutely not, because the people would move their livestock in here, and there would be retaliatory killings in the form of carcass poisoning. So it's very easy to eradicate leopards from an area like this. The livestock farmers will come in. The leopards will obviously come into conflict with these farmers, and they will bait a carcass with a poison, and they'd wipe 2 or 3 leopards out in the process. It's very simple to remove leopards from this ecosystem. Whereas the hunters have a vested interest in a leopard population here, because that represents a form of revenue to them.
Yeah, and they want a harvestable surplus.
Exactly. And they have no interest in harvesting unsustainably, because that would kill the income stream.
So how, amongst other conservationists, not just in the cheetah world, but in the broader world in southern Africa, how does this mindset that you have fit with the other people that you're at conferences with? Because I imagine you must butt heads, because I know that there are a few. You know, I'm thinking Dr. Amy Dickman, who's been on this podcast before, Lions in Tanzania. She has a very similar kind of mindset and a kind of acceptance of, this is good because I've seen the good that it does. And I know that where hunting exists in those places, that lions have a place. But how have you found it amongst your peers?
Yes, it's very interesting that you mentioned Amy Dickman. I mean, she's obviously pro-hunting. She's seen the conservation benefits of hunting, but she is not pro our hands-on approach to wildlife management. She's not pro-wildlife management at all. She prefers the pure unmanaged systems whilst being pro-hunting at the same time. Whereas in South Africa, we've fully embraced the fortress conservation model, which means fencing humanity out and managing wildlife, relocating to ensure genetic integrity. Someone like Amy would be more pro corridor creation.
Yeah, but is that because of she's in Tanzania, where there is these big open spaces, a very different landscape to South Africa?
Exactly. You'd probably find if she came to South Africa, she'd adopt a similar approach to ours, meta-population management.
Interesting. But what about other people that you? I mean, is it? It's not that common, I don't think, amongst conservationists.
No. So
your mindset.
Our conservation philosophy is heavily frowned upon. So when we go to conferences and we present our work, it is, I mean, you won't believe it. I mean, I remember going to a conference in Colombia once, and a woman came up to me afterwards, and she was disgusted by our conservation approach. You know, the hands-on approach, the active management, the fencing, the blocking out of communities, from entering the conservation area. But you know what these people often fail to see is that the fortress conservation approach that we've adopted in South Africa has actually been hugely beneficial from 3 perspectives. It's been wonderful from a financial perspective, the source of foreign currency coming into South Africa, dollars, pounds, euros, coming into areas which were marginal for agriculture, in other words, not very profitable for agriculture. So we're earning these foreign currencies on old agricultural land, whilst restoring that land from an environmental perspective. You know, we're bringing back environmental functionality onto those properties. And from a social perspective, we're employing more people per unit area, because there's anti-poaching teams, there's fencing teams, there's lodge teams. Some of our private game reserves in South Africa have 40 lodges. You know, that's employing 400 people on what was historically a cattle farm in apartheid that employed 8 laborers. And didn't treat them very well, And now we have people from all over the world coming to these areas, engaging with the local community, employing more people per unit area, and paying them a higher wage. So we, and I know a lot of people are not going to like to hear this, but we sincerely believe that our model will be exported to other parts of Africa. We're seeing it hit Malawi. We're seeing the recovery of wildlife in Malawi. We're seeing tourism coming up. We're seeing the fences coming up. The first fence in West Africa has recently been erected around a protected area. And this is the beginning of more fencing in West Africa.
Do you see, just going back to your sort of longer term vision for fencing and fortress conservation, it's kind of a failure though, isn't it? The fact that we have to do that.
It's a failure of society,
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. It's very sad that we've had to resort to fences and fortress conservation. It's basically admitting that humanity cannot coexist with wildlife.
And that's why this area here is such an amazing and important model.
Because if it works here, it
can work
proves
elsewhere.
that coexistence can actually work.
So what's the next phase here? So you landed with all. I mean, tell me what that journey was like. I'm curious to know because we weren't on it. You're in the air with all these cheetahs in boxes.
It smells terrible. Yes, no, it really it doesn't smell good. And for the first time, my corona mask was actually quite useful. The cheetah, it's a very strange animal. They strangely make peace with a crate about half an hour into the transport. They make peace with the crate and they actually just sit there and they communicate with each other. So you hear a lot of cheetah chirps, and they have a very weird chirp that they produce. It's more like a bird sound.
Because cheetah don't roar.
Absolutely, they don't roar. Yeah, they're not. They don't belong to the roaring cats like like lion, leopard, and tigers.
Because that's why they you can correct me, were considered small cats for a period of time, right?
Cheetahs,
because they didn't roar?
Yes, they were considered mesopredators, which is
Okay.
a medium-sized predator, yeah. But they're completely unrelated to the roaring cats. Cheetahs actually evolved in North America. So if you look at the pronghorn, the second fastest land mammal, the speeds attained by the pronghorn evolved in response to predation by the North American cheetah.
Which went extinct a long time ago.
Yes, about 2-3 million years ago. It was called Merwe synonyx. There were two species that existed in North America. And then they crossed the Beringian land bridge between Alaska and Russia during a cool period when it was possible to cross there. And moved into Eurasia. And there were two species that existed in Eurasia up to about a million years ago, including the largest cheetah that ever existed, which was the giant European cheetah. It weighed about 120 kilograms, the size of a female lion.
Wow. So, like, to give by comparison, how much would these be weighing that we're releasing here?
About 30 to 50 kilograms.
Oh, they're light.
Very light. Cheetah have become smaller over evolutionary time in the last million years.
Huh.
Yeah, very interesting. And they crossed into Africa sometime in the past million years.
So, what's the game plan now? So once as you said, these cheetah are now in a boma here. What's the next weeks and months look like?
So we're going to keep them in this boma for about another, let's say, 3-4 weeks. Just break their homing instinct to ensure that they don't want to return back to South Africa. Get them habituated to the area. The resident carnivores will come and visit them at the boma: lion, hyena, leopard. And then around about 3-4 weeks from now, we'll open the gates. And off they go, and they have to survive. So they obviously lose a little bit of fitness and condition in the boma. But, cheetah are we've realized it's not a major problem. We all know that, these cheetah are wild functional animals. They come from a wild environment, even though it's fenced in South Africa. They're all capable hunters. So it's up to them to go out there and to, number one, avoid competing predators, and number two, catch their own food. That's pretty much a cheetah's life.
It's going to be exciting. And they're all collared.
all collared with satellite collars, so we'll be able to see, where they're moving on a daily basis, and to monitor them and to track them. We've got a wonderful team here at Merwe with helicopters, so the monitoring's actually done from the air because the landscape's so difficult to traverse. And we'll keep an eye on them, closely monitor them for about, for the next year at least. And then in the long run, we'll have to do genetic top-ups just to prevent inbreeding.
So you'll have to bring in new animals.
Yes. Now this is a long-term game. Yeah.
So how far from here are you can open your beer, Tyler. I've noticed you. Do you need another one?
This one's a bit warmer.
A bit warm.
Yeah.
I think they're all a little warm now. It's actually pretty warm out here.
There we go. Thank you.
How far are the closest cheetah to where we are?
Not too far. It's about an 8-hour drive, but bad roads, so only about 300-400 kilometers from here in Malawi. We have cheetahs in Liwonde National Park. Which
is that fenced?
That's fenced,
okay.
Yeah. They were reintroduced there in 2017. We started with 4. We're at about 20 now. We'll probably collect a few more from them because that's a growing population. We have cheetahs in Majeti, Malawi, and then we have a resident cheetah population in Tet Province, Mozambique, which we believe there's a few individuals running around there because every now and then we pick up a footprint.
Okay.
And every 5 years someone manages to snap a photograph. So we believe...
So it is possible over time that you'll get integration with outside populations, with this population, but maybe not in the near future.
We're really hoping that these cheetahs will cross into Gorongosa National Park at some point in time, which is not far from here. Naturally recolonized Gorongosa.
So there's none there?
None there at the moment, no. Okay. And then, there's a lot of, human destruction of the landscape between Merwe and other surrounding protected areas. I personally don't believe that there will be colonization further than Gorongosa, but it could happen. It could happen. And if it does, it'll be a wonderful event.
So what does success look like here? Because success won't be everything surviving, because that seems unrealistic to me.
Yes. Now, we make peace with the fact that of the 11 cheetah that we have in the boma here, over the next year we'll probably lose 5-6 individuals. Gin traps, competing predators, lion, leopard. But our hope is that 1 or hopefully 2 females will reproduce. And once what we've realized managing cheetah populations is that they are reliant on a small number of fit and fertile females that produce that successfully raise a lot of cubs to independence. Okay. So you need just 1 of those females in a system like that, and she will raise 13, 14 cubs to independence, and she will populate this area. So success to us in Gorongosa will be, in 50 years, we'll have 120 cheetahs, yeah.
That would be amazing. And sorry, did you? I think you mentioned this right at the start. Is that what you feel like the carrying capacity of this area in Qatar 11 is?
Yes. If you look at the recovery of wildlife populations here since the hunters came in the mid-90s, this area has the ecological capacity to support 120 wild cheetahs.
How do you actually work that out?
We have some clever scientists that have these models. So basically what we do is we get these models from these scientists at universities, and you simply plug in the size of the conservation area, and then you plug in the prey numbers.
Okay.
So 20,000 reedbuck, 7,000 hartebeest, 16,000 buffalo, so many rhino, so many elephant, and you plug in all the prey numbers, about 20 species for this area, and then it spits out your predator
number. So I suppose in the long run, once eventually you get there, you'll be able to actually, for this exact habitat, you'll be able to ground truth whether that's correct or whether it needs adjusted.
It'll probably be a little bit out.
Yeah.
But we imagine anything between 60 and 200 cheetahs could survive out here.
Well, it truly was spectacular watching them being released into the bomas yesterday.
Yeah.
Amazing, Tyler. Right?
I got some amazing photos. I was down, probably a meter, 4 feet away from those cages being opened, and they come running out of there full speed, and yeah, it was pretty incredible to watch.
Yeah, no, it's a very majestic animal. It's a beautiful animal, and it's not dangerous to human beings.
Yeah.
And so yeah, always a pleasure. Sometimes I forget how remarkable the species is that I work with.
Yeah. And those two males those are huge. I've never seen cheetahs that big.
Yes, they two big boys. They're the oldest cheetahs that we brought in, 3-4 years old, in the prime of their life.
Yeah.
And we imagine that they'll do the first round of breeding before the other males catch up with them in size.
It must feel pretty amazing to you to be so involved with this species in particular and have the opportunity to bring so many cheetah to a place like this. Did you ever think 10 years ago you would be doing that? You'd have that opportunity? Well, I don't even know. What were you doing 10 years ago? Were you involved in cheetah conservation then?
No, I was actually an entomologist.
Oh, really?
I studied insects at university.
Wow, this is way more interesting. Or all the entomologists who listen are going, what are you talking about?
I studied entomology at university, and I did it genetics of insects. Yeah. So I did conservation genetics of a beetle species, and that gave me an idea of how gave me a good genetic understanding, which is crucial to the work that I do today, because the same genetic principles apply.
I know who I'm phoning next year when I do my genetics module at university.
Yeah, don't ask me the finer details, but I do understand the bigger picture of conservation genetics.
So what took you from entomology to what you're doing now?
I basically landed with my bum in the butter. Yeah, it was
That's such a South African phrase, that.
No, it was a complete fluke. I finished my master's degree at university, and I saw an advertisement, advertisement for a cheetah meta-population coordinator. And I knew that I had a strong genetics background, and at that time our cheetah population wasn't increasing in South Africa. We had a lot of problem cheetahs running around on farmland, and this farmland happened to be owned by Afrikaans-speaking farmers, Boers. And I'm a van der Merwe, so I speak relatively good Afrikaans. So my job was to go and liaise with these farmers and to remove their problem animals that were killing their sheep and their cattle and their goats, and to relocate them to protected areas. And that was essentially the start of the meta population. And it all developed from there when we got them off the farmland and into the fence protected areas, and then the numbers started increasing. And that's how it all came about.
So who is it that you were working for then?
I work for a conservation NGO called the Endangered Wildlife Trust. I work for the Carnivore Conservation Program, so I specifically focus on cheetahs. And then we have a wild dog coordinator. And then my brother, so I work mainly almost exclusively inside fence systems. So I manage the animals genetically inside the fence systems, and my brother works outside of the fence system for the same organization.
Really? Also on cheetah? Or?
Cheetah, leopard, and wild dog.
Oh, yes, amazing.
Yeah. So he's got a completely different job. I very rarely engage with any communities. I simply work with reserve managers, whereas he has to go out and engage with the farmers who are losing livestock to these predators. So he's got a very frustrating job. The animals he's working with are in population decline. They've been shot out by farmers. He gets a lot of angry phone calls every day, whereas I get friendly phone calls requesting cheetah.
I wonder. It would be interesting to have a separate conversation with him as to what the solution is there, because, like we were saying at the start, ultimately in the long run, we need to be able to have conservation outside of fenced areas as well.
That's the ultimate goal. Yes.
Yeah. He must be very jealous of your position where you have this abundance of animals that you need to do stuff with, like take them to Mozambique.
Exactly. It's very rare to be, working on a conservation project where you're making constant gains. Yeah. Our population's getting bigger. We're finding more safe space. Whereas most other conservationists are just standing there trying to stop this tide of anthropogenic human destruction of the
fingers
landscape.
in the damn wall that's leaking every day.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Well, it's nice. Yeah, it's nice in a world full of often bad news for there to be a a win like this, and been incredible to be here and witness it and get to meet you and this whole team and see what's going on.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm very fortunate to be working on this project, and to sleep well at night, knowing that you're doing something useful for society and to make up for my other sins.
By the sounds of it, you might have a lot more work to do.
Yes, exactly.
Pre-podcast conversation.
Yes, no, I tell you, this project is taking off, and we're finding more safe space, and I'm just getting drawn into it more and more, and it's just more permitting and more paperwork and more relocations and more liaison with donors and reserve managers, and it's incredibly rewarding, but it's sometimes it's good to switch off, and while we're moving forward, it's very difficult to take your foot off the pedal. So it's not always the healthiest work to do from a social.
But you probably don't stop.
Exactly. We just keep going. Yeah. And we have our moments. I mean, look where we're sitting under this beautiful.
I know the moon has come out now, and I mean, there's nowhere else in the world I want to be right now. We're talking about cheetah conservation underneath the moon in Mozambique.
In the back of an open-air Land Cruiser.
I mean, the only thing that would make it better if it was an open-air Land Rover. But don't say that to anybody out here.
I strongly disagree with that statement.
So what's next for you? What, have you got anything, another cool project lined up?
Yes. So
I'm guessing you'll be back here periodically.
Absolutely. We'll be bringing in cheetah. The long-term objective for this place is to increase the population to the extent that we need to remove from here.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Incredible. And then we can move these animals to other places as we see greater levels of economic development in Africa and political stability and social upliftment. What we've realized is that for conservation to march forward, you do need economic development. You do need social progress, and if you look at a country like Zimbabwe, where we had this economic and social decline over the past 21 years, their cheetah population decreased from 1,000 individuals to 170. So the irony is we need more economic development to get these conservation gains and to get these opportunities to work in places like this. And the next step for us is India.
So that's the next big thing on your list.
That's the next big frontier, and India has the potential for a wild cheetah population of over 1,000 individuals in the long run. And we know that they're going to make the same mistakes as us. They're going to lose individuals. The initial reintroductions will probably fail. But in the long term, they'll learn from their mistakes, and they'll learn about the importance of the boma, and they'll probably realize the importance of fencing. And within 50 years, we imagine a growing wild cheetah population in India.
Well, that would be incredible. Vincent, it's been tremendous to spend time with you the last day or two. You're shooting off tomorrow, which I'm sad about because I would have liked to spend more time with you, but I'm glad that we managed to put this time aside this evening to have you on the podcast. So thank you so much.
No, thank you guys, and it's been a pleasure meeting you, and thanks for the opportunity to engage with you.